The first sound I remember that day wasn't applause, laughter, or the rustle of graduation gowns. It was a gunshot. A single sharp crack that split the air like lightning splitting the sky. Then silence. A silence so heavy it pressed against my chest, suffocating me as every head turned toward the source of the noise. My son Daniel had been smiling a second earlier, holding his diploma with trembling hands, his wheelchair parked proudly at the edge of the stage. Now he slumped forward, his gown darkening with a spreading stain of red. My mind couldn't process it at first. Not here, not on this day. This was supposed to be his moment, his victory over years of struggle, surgeries, therapy, and ridicule. It wasn't supposed to end with my boy gasping for breath, his face pale against the crimson fabric of his gown. I remember someone screaming. It might have been me. And then I saw her, Karen, our HOA president, standing at the back of the open-air hall, her hand still gripping the revolver. Her face was twisted, not with horror or regret, but with something colder, satisfaction. She muttered words I couldn't hear over the chaos, but her lips formed the sentence I've replayed in my head every night since. He shouldn't have been allowed. Allowed to what? To graduate, to live. My name is Thomas. Most people know me as Governor Ashford. I've spent years smiling for cameras, giving speeches, shaking hands, cutting ribbons. I fought political battles and endured scandals, but nothing prepared me for that moment. The second my son's life was stolen, not just by a bullet, but by the hatred of a woman we once thought of as a harmless busybody. Before I tell you how it all came apart, how secrets unraveled, loyalties fractured, and justice twisted, I need you to understand something. We weren't a perfect family, but that day was supposed to prove we'd made it through the fire. Daniel wasn't just my son, he was my miracle. And yet Karen, with her iron smile and endless HOA fines, saw him as a symbol of everything she despised. The story doesn't begin with the gunshot. It begins years earlier, with cracks no one wanted to see. Back then, life in Willow Creek looked picture-perfect. Rows of pastel houses with trimmed lawns, a lake reflecting the sunset, children riding their bikes without fear. When we moved in, I thought it was paradise, a safe place to raise Daniel after his accident left him bound to a wheelchair. My wife, Claire, believed it too. She said the HOA would keep everything orderly and peaceful. I wanted to believe her. At first, Karen was just there. The kind of neighbor who'd knock on your door with a fake smile and a complaint about your trash cans being 2 inches off the curb. She'd scold kids for chalk drawings on sidewalks and leave warnings taped to mailboxes. But we brushed it off. Every community had a Karen, didn't it? Annoying, yes, dangerous, never crossed my mind. Daniel was 10 when we moved in, 10 years old, shy, and still learning how to wheel himself with confidence. He had been in the accident at 8, a car wreck that shattered his spine and changed our lives forever. He was different now. He tired easily, his muscles stiffened, but his mind. Oh, his mind was sharp as a blade. He devoured books, loved chess, and dreamed of becoming a teacher. But Karen didn't see that. She didn't see him. She saw the ramp we had to install at our front porch. She saw the modified van parked in our driveway. She saw anything that wasn't uniform or aesthetic in her perfect little kingdom. And every time, she found a way to remind us. The first letter came 2 weeks after we moved in. Your ramp violates community guidelines. Claire was furious. She called it heartless. I filed an exemption form, thinking it would solve the issue, but it didn't. Every time I fixed one thing, Karen found another. Our mailbox was the wrong shade of white. Our grass was too long. She even tried to ban Daniel's service dog, Max, claiming pets over 50 pounds aren't allowed. We fought her, of course, and each fight chipped at our patience, our sense of belonging. But I didn't yet see the depth of her obsession. Looking back, maybe I should have. There were moments, like the night we came home to find graffiti on our ramp, cripples scrawled in red paint. Or the time Daniel overheard Karen whispering to another neighbor, "That boy shouldn't be here. He brings down the value." I wanted to believe it was just cruelty, not malice. But cruelty, left unchecked, grows into something far darker. The graduation ceremony was supposed to wash all that away. Daniel had worked harder than anyone else I knew. Every morning he dragged himself into his wheelchair without complaint, rolled into school while kids stared, and studied until his eyes burned. He never asked for pity, only respect. Claire spent weeks planning his celebration. The smell of fresh-baked pies filled the kitchen. My daughter, Emily, decorated the living room with banners that read, "We're proud of you, Danny." Even I, with all my political duties, cleared my calendar. Nothing mattered more than that day. But Karen mattered too, at least to herself. She sent us one final letter the week before the ceremony. This time, it wasn't about ramps or mailboxes. It was about Daniel. She wrote, "It's inappropriate for someone like him to participate in the ceremony. It will draw unnecessary attention and disrupt the experience for the other students." I crumpled the letter in my fist. Claire begged me not to respond. "She's trying to bait you," she said. "Don't give her power." But something in Karen's words festered. Someone like him. I remember tucking that letter into my suit pocket the morning of the graduation. A reminder that not everyone wanted Daniel to succeed. But I didn't know just how far Karen was willing to go. When the shot rang out, time slowed. I ran, my heart a drum in my throat, my hands shaking as I reached my son. His gown was soaked, his lips trembling as he tried to speak. Claire fell to her knees, pressing her hands against the wound, screaming for help. Emily's sobs echoed through the hall. And me, I looked up at Karen. And for the first time, I saw her not as a nuisance, not as a neighbor, but as the enemy who had been waiting years for her moment. And I swore right then that I would destroy her. But here's the thing. You don't become governor without learning one truth. Nothing is ever as simple as it looks. And what I discovered in the days that followed wasn't just a story of a gunshot. It was a story of buried secrets, betrayals in my own family, and a choice that nearly broke me. Because Karen wasn't working alone. And the person helping her was someone I loved. The woman who shot my son wasn't the only enemy. One of my own had handed her the weapon. The truth is, families don't break all at once. They crack slowly, silently, under the weight of things no one wants to admit. Looking back, I should have seen the signs, not just in Karen's venom, but inside my own home. Because betrayal doesn't always come from the outside. Sometimes it's born under your roof, hidden beneath the same last name. After the shooting, when investigators swarmed the school grounds and police pinned Karen to the floor, I couldn't think beyond Daniel's blood on my hands. The sound of his shallow breaths. The copper taste of fear in my mouth. But when they told me she hadn't acted alone, that someone provided her with inside information about the ceremony's security, the seating, even the timing, I froze. Who would know all of that? Who could hate us enough to hand her the chance? The answer was unbearable. Flash back with me for a moment because you need to understand my family. To the public, we looked like the perfect political portrait. Me, the governor; Claire, the elegant first lady of the state; Emily, the golden child with perfect grades and a cheerleader's smile; and Daniel, the miracle boy who overcame tragedy. The cameras loved us. Magazines ran covers with titles like "The Family That Inspires Hope." But behind the shutters and staged smiles, things weren't as glossy, especially between my two children. Daniel and Emily were only 3 years apart. Before the accident, they'd been inseparable. He followed her everywhere, his hero in pigtails, while she defended him on the playground. But when the car crash changed Daniel's life, everything shifted. Suddenly, the spotlight that once belonged to Emily dimmed, stolen by her brother's struggles. At first, she tried. She pushed his wheelchair in parades, she held his hand during therapy. But she was a teenager, desperate to be seen for her own achievements. And every time I bragged about Daniel's courage or the news stations ran another story about the governor's brave son, I saw something flicker in her eyes. A resentment she never dared to speak aloud. One night when Daniel was asleep and I thought Emily couldn't hear me, I told Claire, "He's the reason I get up every morning. He's the heart of this family." I didn't notice Emily in the doorway, her fists clenched. Karen, of course, knew how to sniff out weakness. That was her talent, finding fractures and prying them wide open. It started with little things. She complimented Emily's independence, told her she was wasted living in her brother's shadow, whispered that the community would respect her if not for the endless pity surrounding Daniel. At first, I thought Emily ignored her. After all, what teenager listens to a woman like Karen? But there were moments that made me wonder, like the time Karen fined us for unauthorized lawn furniture, and Emily muttered, "Maybe if we followed the rules for once, she wouldn't hate us." Or when she snapped at Daniel, "You get everything. Attention, sympathy, even exceptions. What about me?" Those words stung worse than any insult Karen ever threw. Claire always told me not to worry. She's just a girl trying to find herself. She loves her brother. But love is complicated, and when jealousy festers, it can twist into something unrecognizable. The investigators said Karen's gun wasn't the only weapon. She had paperwork, blueprints of the school's stage, a list of the security detail, even the schedule for when Daniel would roll across to receive his diploma. All of that information had been leaked from inside my household. And only one person could have done it. Emily. The thought made my stomach churn. Was my daughter capable of betraying her own brother? I told myself no again and again. She might be angry, she might feel overlooked, but she loved him. She had to. Still, the memories wouldn't leave me. The slammed doors, the rolled eyes, the late-night phone calls when she whispered in hushed tones. The time I found Karen's number scrawled in the back of her notebook, when she swore it was for a school project. Maybe I should have dug deeper then. Maybe I should have asked her who she was talking to, where she was going when she slipped out at night. But I was too busy fighting Karen in board meetings, too busy defending Daniel in the media. I thought I was protecting my family. Instead, I was blind to the storm inside it. The first confrontation came months before the graduation, though I didn't realize it at the time. Daniel had just finished a grueling round of therapy. His knuckles were raw from the push rims of his chair, his face glistening with sweat, but he was smiling. "Dad," he said, "I think I'll be able to wheel across the stage myself." I clapped him on the shoulder, pride swelling in my chest. But behind us, Emily rolled her eyes. "You act like he's climbing Mount Everest, it's just a stage." "Emily," I warned, but she shrugged and walked away. Later that night, Claire found me packing. "She didn't mean it," she said. "She's just tired of everything being about him." But what if it wasn't just tiredness? What if it was something deeper? Here's a detail I've never told anyone. Not the press, not my colleagues, not even Claire. 2 weeks before the graduation, I caught Emily in the garage, rifling through the locked cabinet where I keep my official documents. "What are you doing?" I demanded. She froze, a guilty flush spreading across her face. "Nothing. I was looking for a charger." "A charger?" I pointed at the papers in her hand. "That doesn't look like a charger." She dropped them instantly, stammering excuses. I wanted to press her, but Claire appeared, smoothing things over with her calm voice. "Thomas, don't be so hard on her. Teenagers snoop." I let it go. God help me, I let it go. Now, standing in that blood-soaked hall after the gunshot, those memories came crashing back. The investigators whispered about betrayal. And when I looked at my daughter, her face pale, her eyes darting anywhere but Daniel's limp body, I felt a sickness I couldn't name. Could she have done it? Could my own child have armed the woman who despised us? I didn't want to believe it, but sometimes wanting isn't enough. The days that followed were a blur of hospital corridors, reporters shouting questions, and sleepless nights by Daniel's bedside. He clung to life with the same stubbornness that carried him through every therapy session, every cruel whisper at school. Machines beeped, doctors whispered, and I sat holding his hand, promising him silently that I wouldn't let Karen win. But every time I looked up, I saw Emily in the corner, distant, restless. She avoided my eyes. She snapped at nurses. She scrolled on her phone while her brother lay fighting for his life. And one night I overheard her on a call. Her voice was sharp, hushed, laced with guilt. "I didn't know she'd go that far," she whispered. My chest tightened. My worst fear was no longer a shadow, it was real. But here's the cruelest part of all, I still loved her. She was my daughter, my firstborn, the little girl who once held my hand at parades. How do you hold someone accountable when your heart begs you to protect them? That was the choice I faced, the choice between loyalty and truth, between shielding my daughter and seeking justice for my son. And as I listened to her whisper apologies to someone on the other end of that call, I realized something terrifying. Karen wasn't the mastermind. She was just the weapon. Someone else, someone closer, was pulling the strings. If Karen wasn't the real mastermind, then who was? And why did my daughter think she was only helping? When you're governor, you learn that silence speaks louder than screams. And in my house, after the shooting, silence was deafening. The beeping of Daniel's machines filled the gaps where conversations should have been. The smell of antiseptic clung to our clothes, our hair. Claire buried herself in prayers, whispering over rosaries like they could stitch our boy back together. Emily stayed on her phone, earbuds jammed in, walls up higher than I'd ever seen. I wanted to shake her. I wanted to demand the truth, to drag it out of her no matter how much it hurt. But every time I opened my mouth, I saw the girl she used to be, the one who danced barefoot in the sprinklers, the one who colored get-well cards for Daniel after his accident. That girl couldn't be guilty, could she? Still, the investigator's words gnawed at me. She didn't act alone. Karen had been many things, controlling, vindictive, obsessive, but cunning. No, she didn't have the brains to pull off something this calculated. Someone fed her, groomed her, gave her access, someone who knew us. And the way Emily whispered into her phone that night. I didn't know she'd go that far. That wasn't nothing. That was a thread. And I intended to pull it until the whole damn tapestry came undone. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. It was 2 days after the shooting. I had just left Daniel's room after watching him twitch in pain despite the morphine drip. His lips were pale, his chest heaving. I'd leaned down, kissed his forehead, and promised, "You're going to walk into your future, Danny, even if I have to carry you." When I walked into the waiting lounge, Emily was there, curled up on one of the vinyl couches, scrolling her phone. The bluish glow lit her face, and I saw it, Karen's name on her screen, a text thread. My stomach dropped. I snatched the phone from her hands. "Dad, what the hell?" she shrieked, clawing for it. But I held it out of reach. My blood roared in my ears as I read the messages. "Karen, everything's in place. They won't see it coming. Emily, just make it dramatic, not dangerous. I just want him embarrassed. Karen, trust me." My knees almost buckled. Embarrassed, my son was clinging to life. Embarrassment was the excuse. "Emily," I whispered, my voice breaking, "what did you do?" Her face flushed crimson, then white. She looked like a child caught stealing candy, except this wasn't candy, it was betrayal. "I didn't know she had a gun," she said quickly, tears springing to her eyes. "I swear, Dad, I didn't know she'd actually hurt him. I just wanted—" Her words caught in her throat. "You just wanted what?" I snapped. Her lips trembled. "I wanted you to see me, to finally look at me the way you look at him." The world tilted. It's strange how in the middle of rage, your mind can still flash snapshots of the past. I saw her twirling in her ballet recital while I sat in the front row, clapping half-heartedly because my eyes were on Daniel's tiny wheelchair in the corner. I saw her report card, straight A's, crumpled on the counter because I was busy celebrating Daniel's progress in therapy. I saw the jealousy brewing and my blindness feeding it. But sympathy doesn't erase consequences. "You gave her everything she needed," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. "You told her when, where, how. You handed her your brother's life." Emily shook her head violently. "No, I didn't mean, Dad, you have to believe me. I thought she'd prank him, humiliate him, make him stumble on stage or something. I thought it'd be harmless. I didn't want him dead." Claire walked in then, catching only the tail end of our words. "What's going on?" I held up the phone. My wife's face went pale. "Emily," she whispered, her voice soft but trembling, "tell me this isn't true." But our daughter just crumpled into sobs, clutching her knees, muttering, I didn't know. For a moment, I wanted to cover it all up. Pretend I hadn't seen the messages, protect her. That instinct runs deep in parents. But another instinct, stronger, screamed louder, Daniel, my boy fighting for his life. His dreams bleeding out of him because of this madness. The governor in me knew what had to be done. The father in me wanted to smash the phone, bury the evidence, and pretend Emily was innocent. That's when Claire grabbed my hand. Her grip was ice cold. "Thomas," she said firmly, "we can't protect her from this. If she helped Karen, even by accident, we have to face it. We owe Daniel the truth." I looked into my wife's eyes and saw no hesitation. No denial, just pain. And I realized something that cut me deeper than any bullet. She believed Emily capable of it too. The next day, I arranged a private meeting with Detective Harris, the lead investigator. A no-nonsense man with graying hair and eyes that missed nothing. I handed him Emily's phone. "Governor, are you sure about this?" he asked, brows furrowing. "No," I admitted, "but it's the only way." He read the messages in silence, then exhaled sharply. "This doesn't just implicate her, it changes everything. Karen might plead she was manipulated, that she thought she was helping the governor's daughter." "Karen doesn't need any help painting herself as the victim," I muttered. Harris nodded grimly. "But if your daughter testifies, if she cooperates, it could unravel a bigger picture. Karen's not smart enough to plan this alone. Someone else is backing her, someone with resources." That word, resources, stuck to me like tar. Because here's the question that kept me up at night. Why would a suburban HOA president risk her freedom, her life, just to stop a disabled boy from graduating? What did she really stand to gain? That question haunted me as I sat by Daniel's bed, listening to the hiss of the oxygen, the click of the monitors. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Karen's cold smile, and I saw Emily's tears, and between them a shadow. Someone else, someone bigger, pulling strings. And then the threats started. It began with an envelope slid under our hospital room door. No return address, no name. Inside, a single sheet of paper with 5 words scrawled in block letters. Drop it or lose more. Claire nearly fainted when she read it. Emily turned white as a sheet. And me, I felt the fire ignite. Someone thought they could scare me into silence. They didn't realize who they were dealing with. That night, I sat in the hospital chapel alone. The smell of melted wax, the cold stone under my knees. I stared at the crucifix above the altar, my chest aching with a single question. Who had declared war on my family? The answer came sooner than I expected. Detective Harris called the next morning, his voice taut. Governor, we traced financial transfers linked to Karen. Large sums, too large for a homeowners association president. From who? I asked. He hesitated, then said the name. And my blood ran cold. It wasn't Karen. It was Emily. It was someone sitting in the State House. One of my own political allies. The woman who pulled the trigger was just the puppet. The real enemy wore a suit and shook my hand at every rally. All right, Shahzabe, now we hit the core turning point, part 4-1, 401, 500 words. This part will slow down the shooting scene itself, give cinematic, sensory detail, and show the raw emotional wreckage as everything collapses in front of the family. HOA Karen shot my disabled son during his graduation ceremony. She didn't know I'm the state governor. If you've never heard a gunshot echo in a place meant for joy, I pray you never will. It's a sound that doesn't belong, like thunder cracking in a church or glass shattering in the middle of a lullaby. The ceremony had been beautiful until then. I remember the smell of freshly cut grass from the football field where they'd set up the stage, the warm June sun glinting off rows of folding chairs, the faint buzz of cicadas in the distance. Parents clutched cameras, kids shifted in their gowns, tassels swaying in the breeze. I sat in the front row with Claire, my chest swelling as Daniel waited backstage. He looked nervous, fingers drumming against the armrest of his wheelchair, his cap slightly askew. Emily sat beside me, arms crossed, eyes hidden behind sunglasses. She hadn't spoken to him all morning. When the principal called his name, Daniel Ashford, the crowd erupted. People clapped, whistled, even stood to cheer. My son's smile stretched wide, and with slow, determined pushes on his rims, he wheeled himself across the stage. His service dog, Max, trotted loyally at his side, tail wagging. I thought my heart would burst. Then came the gunshot. Time fractured. Daniel's body jerked, his diploma slipping from his lap. His gown bloomed red, a dark, spreading stain across his chest. For one terrible second, he looked directly at me, confused, hurt, lips parting like he wanted to ask why. Then he slumped sideways, his wheelchair jolting as his head hit the metal armrest. The crowd froze, then erupted into chaos. Screams, gasps, the sharp scrape of chairs toppling as parents shielded their children. Somewhere, a microphone screeched with feedback. Danny, Claire's scream ripped through the air, raw and primal. She vaulted onto the stage, her heels clattering against the wood. I stumbled forward too, my legs heavy, my ears ringing. All I could hear was my own pulse hammering. The metallic tang of blood filled the air, mixing with the summer heat. Daniel's breaths were shallow, wet, gurgling. Claire pressed her hands against the wound, sobbing. Stay with me, baby, stay with me. I dropped to my knees beside her, ripping off my jacket to press against his chest. My hands trembled violently. His eyes fluttered, glassy and fatting. And then I looked up. Karen stood at the edge of the crowd, her revolver still raised. Her face wasn't horrified, it wasn't even shocked, it was smug. She muttered something, words I couldn't hear over the screaming, but her lips formed them clearly enough. He shouldn't have been allowed. Something inside me snapped. I leapt to my feet, roaring for security. 2 officers tackled her within seconds, the gun clattering to the asphalt. Parents shouted. Students cried. Somewhere, Max barked furiously, straining against his leash. But none of it mattered. All I saw was my boy, my miracle, gasping for air on the stage where he was supposed to celebrate life, not fight for it. Claire's hands were slick with blood. We're losing him, Thomas, we're losing him. Paramedics rushed forward, voices sharp and urgent. Get pressure on it, IV line now. They lifted Daniel onto a stretcher, tubes and wires sprouting like vines. His face was pale, lips trembling as if he wanted to speak but couldn't. I bent down, pressed my forehead to his, and whispered, "Hold on, son, just hold on. I won't let them win." They wheeled him away, sirens wailing moments later. The sound tore at me, every pitch a reminder that my boy's life was slipping through my fingers. The rest of the scene blurred. Police swarmed. Reporters shoved microphones at me, their voices vultures circling carrion. "Governor Ashford, was your son the target? Do you believe this was politically motivated? Is it true the shooter is the HOA president from your community?" I couldn't answer, I couldn't think, I couldn't breathe. But Emily, I'll never forget how she looked. She hadn't screamed, she hadn't cried. She stood rooted to her chair, face pale, sunglasses hiding her eyes. And when I caught her staring at Karen being dragged away, I swore I saw recognition there. Not shock, recognition. The hospital was chaos. Doctors rushed Daniel into surgery, machines shrieking as nurses shouted orders. The smell of disinfectant burned my nose. Claire collapsed against me in the waiting room, her body shaking with sobs. Hours passed like years. Every tick of the clock was a knife in my chest. Every set of footsteps in the corridor made me jolt, hopping it was news. Finally, a surgeon emerged, face grim. "The bullet missed his heart by less than an inch," he said. "It punctured a lung. We've stabilized him, but the next 48 hours are critical." Claire wailed with relief and terror all at once. I felt my knees weaken. My boy wasn't gone, not yet, but the fight had only begun. The police came that night. Detective Harris sat across from me in the sterile family lounge, his notebook open. His expression was tight. "Governor, we have Karen in custody. She's not saying much. Keeps repeating that your son shouldn't have been allowed." "Allowed to what?" I demanded. "To live, to graduate." Harris's eyes narrowed. "That's what we need to figure out, but she had help. Someone leaked security details, someone close." I froze. Emily's phone, her messages, her whispers in the dark. My stomach turned. Harris leaned forward. "Governor, if there's something you know, something you're not telling me, now is the time." I opened my mouth, then shut it. My throat burned. My daughter's face flashed in my mind, the little girl she'd once been, the woman she was becoming, the traitor she might already be. I couldn't bring myself to say it, not yet. "Find out who's backing her," I said instead. "Because this," my voice broke, rage spilling through the cracks, "this wasn't just about an HOA dispute. Someone wanted my boy silenced." And that's when the curiosity clawed its way into my brain, the question that wouldn't let me sleep. Why was my disabled son such a threat? What could possibly make a woman like Karen, and whoever stood behind her, see him as dangerous? The next morning, Daniel woke for the first time since surgery. His voice was weak, his words broken by gasps of air. But I leaned close, straining to hear. "Dad," he whispered. "I'm here, son." His eyes darted to the door, fear etched into his face. "Don't trust her." "Who?" I asked desperately. But before he could answer, his monitors beeped frantically, and nurses rushed in, pushing me aside. I never got his answer. The sterile smell of antiseptic hit me the second the emergency room doors burst open. It was sharp, biting, mingling with the metallic tang of blood still clinging to my shirt. My son's blood. The paramedics wheeled Daniel in front of me, his body fragile against the bright white sheets, the oxygen mask fogging with each shallow breath he took. My legs wanted to give out right there in the hospital corridor, but I forced myself to keep walking. Governors don't crumble, not in public. But fathers do. And I was both, suffocating under the weight of the rolls clashing inside me. Doctors swarmed him immediately, shouting words I only half understood. Through and through wound, possible nerve damage, stabilize vitals. Every syllable was a hammer pounding against my chest. I could hear the rapid beeping of machines, the clatter of metal trays, the squeak of shoes against tile. It was chaos, and yet for me it was all happening underwater, muffled, distant, unreal. I pressed my palm to the cold wall, trying to steady my breathing. My wife, Claire, stood next to me, trembling, her nails digging into my arm so hard I thought she might break the skin. Her face was pale, eyes wide, lips moving silently in prayer. I wanted to tell her it would be okay, but the words stuck in my throat. Because what if it would? Time fractured, minutes felt like hours. At some point, a nurse approached us, her face professional but softened with sympathy. We're taking him for x-rays and scans. We need to see what internal damage there is. Please wait in the family room. The family room? A sanitized box with beige walls, plastic chairs, a coffee machine humming in the corner. It felt like a waiting room for judgment where hope and despair sat side by side, staring each other down. Claire collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands. I paced like a caged animal. Every step carried the echo of gunfire in my head, the crack of the pistol, the way Daniel's body jerked, the scream that tore from his throat. I couldn't get it out of my ears. Then the door opened again, and to my disgust, the sheriff walked in. Sheriff Thomas, old friend of mine, at least before tonight. He tipped his hat slightly, trying for respect, but I saw the hesitation in his eyes. "Governor," he said, but then softer, "Mark." I clenched my jaw. "Don't you dare use my first name right now." He sighed, shifting uncomfortably. "Karen's already down at the station, claims it was an accident, says Daniel startled her that she thought." "Thought what?" I snapped, my voice echoing in the small room. Claire flinched. "That my son's wheelchair was a weapon, that his graduation cap looked threatening." My fist shook at my sides. "She aimed a gun at a boy, a disabled boy, my boy." Thomas ran a hand over his weathered face. "You know how tight-knit that HOA community is. Half the neighbors are already spinning stories, saying Daniel rolled too close, that Karen feared for her safety. They're trying to protect her." The words made my stomach turn. Protect her. My son was lying in a hospital bed fighting for his life, and the community wanted to protect her. Claire looked up, tears streaking her cheeks. "Sheriff, please tell me the law still means something in this town." Thomas swallowed. "It does, but politics." He stopped himself, glancing at me. I stepped closer, lowering my voice, but the anger inside me trembled with every syllable. "Politics? You're looking at a father, not a governor. If you let her walk free, if you let those neighbors bury this under excuses, I swear." I cut myself off because the fury rising inside me was dangerous. Dangerous for him, dangerous for me. Just then the doctor returned, a tall man with tired eyes behind his glasses. He removed his surgical cap slowly, as though the gesture itself carried weight. "Governor, Mrs. Hayes," he said gently, "your son is stable for now. The bullet passed through his shoulder, but it caused significant nerve damage. We've managed to control the bleeding, and his vitals are holding. He's unconscious, but alive." Alive, that one word shattered me. Relief crashed into my chest, followed quickly by grief, rage, exhaustion. Claire sobbed into her hands. I staggered back against the wall, dragging air into my lungs like I'd been drowning. But then the doctor's tone shifted. "However, the nerve damage is severe. We'll know more once he wakes, but there's a possibility his left arm may never regain full function." My heart sank again. Daniel had worked so hard, years of therapy, training, endless battles just to prove he could do what others thought impossible. And now, because of her, because of Karen, he might lose more of the independence he fought for. I rubbed my temples, trying to keep myself together. "Can we see him?" The doctor nodded, briefly. When I stepped into the recovery room, the beeping of monitors filled the silence. Daniel lay pale and still, tubes and wires attached to him, his face slack with sedation. I reached for his hand, squeezing gently. It was cold, limp, but it was there. He was still with me. I leaned down, whispering into his ear, though I knew he couldn't hear me. "I'm here, son. Dad's here. You're going to get through this." My voice cracked. "I won't let her get away with it. I promise you that." But as I stood there, something shifted in me. This wasn't just about Karen anymore. It was about the entire system that had enabled her. The HOA board that looked the other way when she bullied neighbors. The sheriff who seemed hesitant to press hard charges. The community willing to twist facts to shield one of their own. They all carried blood on their hands. The smell of antiseptic burned my nostrils again, grounding me in that room. My reflection in the monitor screen looked different, harder, colder. For years, I'd played the governor who balanced empathy with diplomacy. But now, standing over my son's broken body, I realized something. Politics had limits. Fatherhood didn't. As I held his hand, the sheriff's words haunted me. "They're trying to protect her." I turned to Claire, who was stroking Daniel's hair, whispering prayers. "Claire," I said quietly, "they're already building a defense for her." Her head snapped up, eyes fierce despite the tears. "Then burn their defense down." That single sentence seared itself into me. Burn it down. Yes, not just with anger, but with truth, with exposure, with the full weight of who I was. I wasn't just Daniel's father. I was the governor of this state. and I wasn't going to let my son become a statistic, another disabled victim forgotten by the system. But then a thought hit me, dark, dangerous. If I used my position, if I flexed the full power of my office, would I be crossing a line? Was I fighting for justice or for revenge? Could I even separate the two anymore? As those questions swirled inside me, the machines in the room beeped steadily, a cruel reminder that time was ticking. Karen was at the station. Her allies were spinning their stories, and my son lay between life and death. And then out of nowhere, Daniel's fingers twitched in my hand. Just a small movement, but real, my breath caught. Claire gasped. I bent closer, desperate. His lips moved, barely audible. "Dad," a whisper fragile as smoke. "Don't let her." His eyes fluttered open just a crack, pupils unfocused. "Don't let her win." Then his head lolled back, and he sank into unconsciousness again. The weight of his words settled on me like a command, not just a plea, a command. And at that exact moment I knew there would be no compromise, no half measures, not anymore. The only question that remained was this: how far was I willing to go to keep that promise? The hospital walls had a way of swallowing sound, but that night they couldn't quiet the storm inside me. Every hum of machinery, every shuffle of nurses' shoes, every faint cough from another room, it all grated against my nerves. I sat in a stiff chair beside Daniel's bed, my hand wrapped around his. Claire had finally drifted into an uneasy sleep in the corner, her body curled in a chair that was too small to hold her grief. I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying his whisper, "Don't let her win." Those words burned deeper than any oath I'd ever sworn as governor. And in that quiet, sterile room, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to rely on the system, because the system had already shown me its cracks. I was going to dig until I found the truth, even if it meant dragging friends, neighbors, and colleagues into the light they'd worked so hard to avoid. At dawn, Sheriff Thomas returned. He looked worn, his eyes shadowed from a night without rest. He hesitated at the doorway like a guilty man approaching the bench. "Mark," he started, softer than before. I straightened in my chair. "Governor," my voice was steel. He sighed. "We've taken Karen's statement. She insists it was self-defense. Says Daniel rolled up on her, startled her, and she reacted out of fear. Claims she never meant to fire." My jaw tightened. Fear of a boy in a wheelchair holding a diploma, that's her story. Thomas rubbed the back of his neck. "The HOA board's already meeting. They're lining up witnesses who'll testify they saw Daniel make a sudden move toward her. They'll muddy it enough to raise doubt." I stared at him, feeling the rage rise like bile. "You came here to warn me they're going to bury the truth." "No," his voice cracked. "I came here because I'm tired of burying truth. You're right, Mark, the HOA's been covering for Karen for years. Noise, complaints, threats, even a case where she waved a gun at a landscaper. But every time the board rallied around her, spun it, shielded her. I let it happen because half my deputies live in that community, and politics runs deep in small towns." He looked ashamed, and for the first time that night I saw the old Thomas I once trusted. I leaned forward. "Then why now? Why confess this now?" His eyes flicked to Daniel, pale and fragile under the hospital lights. "Because I've got two sons of my own, and if it were them—" His voice trailed off, heavy with what he couldn't say. Silence stretched between us. Finally, I said, "Then help me. Bring me something real, evidence, not gossip. If Karen's been protected, there'll be a trail." He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I'll get you what I can." When he left, I exhaled, running a hand down my face. Claire stirred awake, her voice groggy but sharp. "What did he say?" I told her everything. Karen's claim of self-defense, the HOA's scheming, Thomas's quiet confession. Her face hardened with each word. "So they're going to try to turn our son into the aggressor," she whispered. "A disabled boy shot at his graduation, and they'll spin it like he was the threat." I nodded grimly. "That's the play." Her eyes filled with fire I hadn't seen since she was young. "Then we fight back harder. You're not just his father, Mark. You're the governor. Use it." That was the line I'd been circling for hours. Could I use my office to crush her? Was it justice or abuse of power? Every campaign speech, every press conference, I'd stood there saying no one was above the law. Was I ready to prove it or to break it? Later that morning, an ally arrived. Linda Morales, my chief of staff, sharp as glass and loyal to the bone. She swept into the hospital room in her navy suit, a folder tucked under her arm. "Governor," she said, but her eyes flicked to Daniel, softening. "How is he?" "Stable," I muttered, But she tried to kill him, Linda. Her jaw tightened. Then she picked the wrong family. She dropped the folder on the side table. I did some digging overnight. HOA finances, complaints, police records. It's dirtier than we thought. I opened the folder. Photos, reports, sworn statements that had somehow never seen daylight. A pattern of intimidation, of threats dismissed, of fines levied against families who stood up to Karen while her own violations were ignored. Buried complaints, Linda said, flipping a page. At least 4 neighbors filed police reports in the last 2 years, all mysteriously dropped. And here, she tapped a highlighted section. Karen's firearm license expired 6 months ago. She wasn't even legally allowed to carry last night. I felt my pulse quicken. That's it, that's the thread. But then Linda leaned closer, lowering her voice. Governor, if we go public with this, it'll look like you're using your office for personal vengeance. The media will eat it alive. You'll need to decide, father or governor, because you can't be both in this fight. Her words cut me because she was right. If I moved as governor, the press would scream corruption. If I moved as father, they'd say I was blinded by grief. Either way, the truth risked being twisted. Claire stood then, her voice steady. He's both, father and governor, and maybe that's exactly what Daniel needs right now, someone who won't bow to politics, someone who can't look away. The room went silent, the weight of her words pressing down on us. I looked at Daniel again, his chest rising and falling under the hospital blanket. He didn't have the luxury of politics. He had a bullet wound, nerve damage, and a life changed forever. The decision crystallized. I wasn't going to sit back while they rewrote the story. If that made me a biased father, so be it. If it made me a ruthless governor, so be it. But I would not let Karen, or anyone, turn my son into the villain of his own survival. Linda slid me a final document. There's something else. One of the HOA board members, Mrs. Ellison, reached out quietly this morning. She says she has proof the board's been covering for Karen. Emails, minutes, maybe even video, but she's scared, wants protection. Claire gasped, then bring her here right now. Linda shook her head. She won't come to the hospital, says too many eyes, but she's willing to meet tonight off the record. I felt the pieces clicking into place. The system wanted to protect Karen. The community wanted to spin the truth. But here was an ally, someone willing to shatter their wall of lies. Still, a question gnawed at me, a question I couldn't shake. If exposing the truth meant ripping apart the very foundation of our town, of my career, of the fragile peace we'd built, was I willing to sacrifice it all? As I sat there, Daniel's machines beeping steadily beside me, I already knew the answer. Yes, because some things are worth burning down everything for. But before I could say it out loud, a nurse rushed in, her face pale. Governor, Mrs. Hayes, your son's heart rate is spiking. You need to step back. Alarms blared. Doctors swarmed again. Claire screamed Daniel's name, and I was shoved back into the hallway powerless as the monitors screamed louder and louder. I pressed my fists to the wall, eyes locked on the chaos unfolding inside his room. And all I could think was, if he didn't make it through this night, nothing else would matter. Nothing at all. The alarms felt like knives in my ears. Red lights pulsed above Daniel's door, a cruel heartbeat mocking my own. Doctors barked orders, clear the line, increase oxygen, get me epi. And I stood frozen, helpless, fists pressed so hard against the wall my knuckles ached. Claire's scream echoed down the hallway, raw and primal. Daniel, hold on, baby, hold on. Nurses pushed her back, their arms firm but faces gentle. I wanted to fight my way in, tear through anyone in my path, but all I could do was watch through the glass as my son's fragile body convulsed, machines beeping faster, then slower, then terrifyingly flat. Come on, Daniel, I whispered, my breath fogging the window. Don't leave me, not now. Then, like a miracle, the monitor chirped back to life, a weak rhythm but steady. A collective sigh of relief rippled through the room. Claire collapsed against my chest, sobbing with gratitude. My own knees nearly buckled. Minutes later, the lead doctor stepped out, pulling his mask down. He's stable again. It was close, too close, but he pulled through. That boy, a fighter. A fighter, he always had been. Born into struggle, raised in determination, carried through life on grit stronger than most men I'd ever known. I kissed Claire's forehead, tasting salt and sweat. He's not just a fighter, I murmured. He's a survivor. But even in that fragile relief, I knew this wasn't over. Daniel had survived the bullet, but Karen and her army of liars still hovered like vultures, and survival meant nothing if the truth was buried. That night when Daniel slept again, I left the hospital with Linda. Claire begged me not to go, but I promised her I'd return before dawn. I kissed Daniel's cold hand one last time. "I'll be back, son, and when I come back, I'll have justice in my pocket." We drove to a quiet diner on the outskirts of town. Its neon sign buzzed weakly, throwing blue light over cracked asphalt. Inside, the air smelled of burnt coffee and fried eggs. Only 2 booths were occupied, both by truckers lost in their own worlds. In the far corner sat Mrs. Ellison. Thin, nervous, her hands wrapped tightly around a mug she hadn't touched. Her eyes darted up when we slid into the booth. "You came," she whispered, relief in her voice. "I wasn't sure you would." I leaned forward. "You said you had proof." She nodded quickly, fumbling in her purse. Out came a flash drive, small but heavy with weight. She slid it across the table like contraband. "Board emails, minutes, recordings, everything. They've covered for Karen for years. Intimidation, threats, even financial fraud. She was untouchable until now." I stared at the flash drive, my reflection tiny on its surface. This was it, the key to tearing down their wall of lies, but Mrs. Ellison's trembling voice pulled me back. "They'll know it was me. If this gets out, they'll come after me, my family. You have to promise." I placed my hand over hers steady. "No one will touch you, not while I breathe." She swallowed hard, then nodded. "Then take it and burn them all." On the drive back, Linda glanced at me. "This is enough to not just put Karen away, but to dismantle that entire HOA. Fraud, conspiracy, negligence, you name it. But Governor, once this goes public, there's no going back. You'll be in the crosshairs, accused of weaponizing your office. They'll call you ruthless." I looked out the window at the dark countryside rushing past. Let them. I'd rather be called ruthless than fatherless. When we returned to the hospital, dawn was breaking. The halls smelled of disinfectant and stale coffee. Daniel stirred in his bed, his eyes fluttering open. He was groggy, but his gaze locked on mine. "Dad," he whispered, his voice raspy. I rushed to his side. "I'm here." "Did you stop her?" "Not yet, but soon." I squeezed his hand gently. "I will, I swear." The next day I stood in front of cameras, not as governor, not as politician, as a father. I laid the truth bare, Karen's expired license, her history of threats, the HOA's years of cover-ups. And then, with a deep breath, I slid the flash drive across the podium. "Here," I said, "see for yourselves, no spin, no filters, just truth." Reporters shouted questions. Flashes went off like fireworks. The room erupted. And for the first time, Karen's allies faltered. They couldn't spin what was right there in black and white. By nightfall, Karen was charged not just with attempted murder, but with a string of additional offenses. Several board members resigned in disgrace. The sheriff's office launched an internal review. The foundation they'd all built on lies crumbled in a single day. But victory was bitter. Daniel faced months, maybe years, of therapy. His left arm hung weak, unresponsive. He looked at it sometimes with tears in his eyes, trying to mask them with jokes, but I knew. The bullet hadn't just pierced his body, it had stolen a piece of his independence. One evening, as I wheeled him onto the porch, the air heavy with summer rain, he asked me, "Dad, do you think I'll ever be normal again?" My chest ached. I crouched beside him, meeting his eyes. "Son, you were never normal. You've always been extraordinary, and nothing, no bullet, no Karen, no board of cowards, can change that." He smiled faintly, and in that smile I saw hope. Months later, Karen was sentenced. 20 years behind bars, no HOA to save her, no lies left to shield her. She glared at me in the courtroom, venom in her eyes, but I didn't flinch. She thought she'd broken us. She hadn't. The scars remain. Daniel still struggles some days, the therapy grueling, the nightmares worse. Claire sometimes wakes in the night, trembling, and me, I carry the weight of what I did, the lines I crossed. But I'd do it again, every choice, every risk, because when the world tried to bury my son, I dug until I pulled him back into the light. Now, whenever I pass that hospital room, whenever I hear the faint beep of a monitor in my memory, I remember the promise I made. Don't let her win. And I know I kept it. We kept it. And yet one question lingers, a shadow in the quiet. When does justice end and revenge begin? Maybe I'll never know the answer. Maybe no father would. But I do know this, Karen didn't win. My son is alive, and that's enough. Broken heart, what do you think if you were in my place? Would you have used power to crush her or trusted the system? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this story shook you, subscribe for more. Your voice keeps these stories alive.